And welcome back to Stories from the River. I'm Charlie Maloof, host of the podcast with Stacey McCormick. Stacey's our Senior Vice President of Retail Performance at the River. Stacey, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Charlie.
Yeah, so we're going to
forward to it.
We're going to talk about a topic of culture, who Marcus Collins, or Dr. Marcus Collins, he's a professor at the Ross School of Business. He's written this best-selling book, For the Culture, the power behind what we buy, what we do, and who we want to be. Identity, tribalism, so it gets into all of that.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
What was your take initially on Marcus Collins? And let me just set this up. We're in the midst of our World Business Forum, New York City 2023 recap series. And he was like the second or third speaker, I think, on day one. Yep. And was really engaging. And he's got a marketing background, a culture background, and is all about culture and teaching us about culture. So, Stacey, what was your takeaways?
You know, to begin with, I was kind of, I don't know, I had a hard time following. But as we got away from there, and I think it was after you and I had a conversation on the way back, you, I, Harold, Will, Kim, on the way back, I just really started to tie it in with the whole group of speakers that we listened to, and started to kind of intertwine some of the messages and how they could work inside of what we do. And as I did that, I went back, I re-listened to, you sent me the Cadence Bank in good companies, right? Yeah. Podcast, and it just kind of started to resonate. But what I like about him is that he understands that people want to be associated with and be around and be grouped into people that think like them, that look like them, or look like they want to look, mm-hmm. or that have some kind of attribute that they like, and as they see themselves. One of the things that he started with is he said perspective. Mm-hmm. And he put perspective up there, and he said, things aren't the way that they are, things are the way that we are. Mm-hmm. So what that tells me is that we all kind of experience the same things, possibly differently, based on what our perspective is and where we're at inside of our culture.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of the power of perspective. I think it's incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. And so I was not familiar with Marcus Collins prior to World Business Forum. And I didn't connect the dots that I just had been interviewed by Cadence Bank for this podcast. I listened to some of their episodes. They are our banking partner. And so they started this this popular, growing, top-ranked podcast, In Good Companies. And the title of his seemed pretty interesting from season 4, and we'll link to it in the show notes. He actually did 2. He did 1, and then they did a bonus episode, and it was fascinating. So I had listened to his podcast with Cadence Bank, or both of them, the week before. And then prior to him speaking, I got to go to a VIP lunch where, and he was I don't know who was going to be the speaker. Usually one of the speakers will be there, and kind of a private luncheon. And there's like 4 tables of attendees who got to go there. And this was like right before he was supposed to speak. And he basically taught class, super energetic. We were going back and forth, and he had all these large Post-it notes, and was basically teaching class for about an hour and a half of this luncheon, and was really positive and energetic and insightful. And then without skipping a beat, I think he went straight from there to go give his talk on the main stage at World Business Forum.
Right after lunch.
Yeah, which was really, really, really powerful. So he did talk about culture. And do you remember like he gave this kind of brand evolution, of where brands started. Do you remember the first one?
Yeah, it's super, super, insightful and unique at Wedgwood. So Wedgwood Pottery, I guess, would be the name of the company. And that apparently, or they were the first company to ever mark the bottom of their pottery so that it would stand out and people would know who made it. Mm-hmm. And basically that was really the beginning of people putting brands on products.
Yeah, he said brands became receipts for something. The brand stands in for something, and brand is a legal mark. Began with that Wedgwood pottery, and then he goes on to say that brand stood for the evolution of brand. It then stood for trust, and he gave IBM as the example. Goes into brand is love, and he gave Coca-Cola as an example. And then he said brand is identity. And he gave Apple as the example. People like us want things like this, want products like that.
That's it.
And then I don't know if you remember this, where it's going is this, he said, he gave a couple quotes. So let me tee it up. He said from Aristotle, I'm just reading off the pictures of the slides I took. Right. Man is by nature a social animal. Okay. Everyone knows that quote. And then he quoted Emil Durkheim. He said, members who subscribe to a particular culture act in concert to promote social solidarity among them. And he quoted Emil and also Seth Godin, who he called the GOAT of culture discussions. And he said, most of our decisions, we think they're from us, but he said are really being made over here by the culture. The culture is making most of the decisions. So that's why it's important to study. And he said, social groups are important to us. They serve to tell us who we are, what to think, how to behave. The more we value the social group, the more we are willing to be influenced by it. Well, then he goes, the future of brand. So as you go from legal, is the trademark, the legal mark, trust, IBM, love, Coca-Cola, identity, Apple, tribal. And he gets into like politics, are you a blue or a red, elephant or a donkey? And so he said it's going tribal. That's the evolution of the brand. And then just goes into like he talked about trend spotting research, what people are doing in search of popularity and cultural exploration, why people are doing it. So I had a lot on that to make meaning of it. So, there's a lot to take from there. His prose was just on point. I can't speak like that, but I could listen to like collective effervescence. Okay, I gotta have a thesaurus to accompany when he's talking.
Exactly.
He's got a great vocabulary, but people like me do something like this. And so it's really important to kind of understand why people make decisions. And that's why the culture is important.
Yeah. He said one of his statements that he made, which really resonated with me, was the most powerful brands today leverage culture as a system anchored in identity. We talk about, there is no purpose without identity, right? Like, mm-hmm. And so what it's saying is that, this whole conference was based on purpose. Mm-hmm. And so basically what he said is if you have purpose, in other words, identity, and that you can leverage your brand as a system inside of the identity that you want to, that anchors in your identity of who you are, that you will find a community mm-hmm. that's already present that will join you because they want to be anchored in that same identity. And I thought that was super powerful. And then the other one that he spoke of was consumption is a cultural subscription. And I thought that was really powerful.
That's an interesting statement. He's also worked with popular music acts. He worked with Beyonce, ran mm-hmm. digital for her for a while, worked for an ad agency. So he's had a lot of cultural influences. He worked with McDonald's and he talked about their book of fan truths. Mm-hmm. And everyone has a McDonald's order. And that was like a popular campaign that they ran. And he did talk about getting closer. Like when we get closer, that's when the magic happens.
I believe what he did with McDonald's came from what he did with Beyonce, if I remember correctly, because, he was this brand marketer and that he was trying to do a certain thing with them. And then he tried to start a fan club and mm-hmm. come to find out there was already one out there that called themselves the Hive. Mm-hmm. And so got with them and became the Beehive. And now that's the driving force behind Beyonce's fan club. And it's got millions and millions of people in it nationwide. And he saw the power of people wanting to be associated with her. And so therefore what they did with McDonald's was come out with the Travis Scott meal or the Bad Bunny meal or the, whatever. And so the sales went through the roof because people wanted to be associated with that cultural icon. Well,
he did talk a lot about collaboration when you bring two together. And, mm-hmm. I think right now you're looking at like Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and the 1 + 1 =
exactly.
10 or something, and the Swifties. But he talked about how powerful culture is. He even, and I don't know if it was in the podcast episode we listened to beforehand or his talk at the luncheon or the presentation, but he did talk about hiring for culture, mm-hmm. which, as you think about tribalism, one question I have, I'd love to know how you respond to this. If you just hire for culture, but like who culture where they think like you and the language is like you and they're aligned to you, where does diversity come into play? Diversity of thought, diversity of expression. If that's, and maybe I'd like to ask him that to see how he might respond to that.
I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a great way to look at it. I think that, I guess the way I would look at that is that I think there's going to be diversity of thought inside of any folks that even though I think they may primarily think like you or primarily have your the same shared opinions, that people are still kind of intrinsically individual, and so I think that it's like if you took Beyonce's fan club, I guarantee you there's people from all walks of life and all cultures that are inside of that that fan club, and if you got their thoughts on 20 different topics, they might be similar on her, but then they might be dissimilar on everything else. So,
well, I think, in reflecting on it, if you use culture as a primary filter, well, so, okay, I like that. If we can define culture, if we can, and so if we're just going to say it's tribalism and it's like they think like us, and like, I don't think what he's saying is only hire people who have the same political beliefs or leanings as you, because that might not, then you get groupthink.
Yeah.
And, that's not the world that we live in. But if you're talking about culture is in terms of how we treat people, how we recognize people, how we celebrate people, how we earn the right maybe, or meritocracy as opposed to nepotism, in terms of and pay our dues and have a little bit of grit, how we believe about our customers. If those are all things that are you can be culturally aligned, if that's what he's talking about, okay, I can get behind that. As opposed to someone who might not share those certain beliefs. So if you can shape the culture in terms of core values, maybe, okay, I can see where you hire for that type of mindset and culture versus not. But culture can be a nebulous thing. So I do think, hey, understanding this, digging in, I want to read his book and dig into more to understand what are we really talking about when we say hire for culture or use culture as a filter and market for culture, because people do want to be part of a group, but how do you maintain diversity even though you're part of a tribe or part of a group?
I think it's a great question. I think, when you look at it now, I mean, it's one of the filters I use is, do I feel like this person would be a cultural fit? Mm-hmm. Because we have a very unique culture at Broad River, and we work really hard to not only maintain it and keep it and continue to perpetuate it forward in the best way, but we also do everything we can to protect it at the same time. And, I think it's probably not just the core values. Maybe it's also the customer beliefs or the work beliefs or their what their view is on how they should work. And that would be different probably for each department. But I think that it's a great question, and it's certainly something that probably needs to be studied a little bit deeper.
Well, and I think, when you go to an event like this, it's like drinking from a fire hose of information.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think what we got with Marcus Collins, super energetic, fun. It's fun to learn about relevant cultural things and brands. So when you're talking about brands and marketing, I think that's a fun topic. And he's super engaging as a presenter. And if you're talking about like the Travis Scott McDonald's meal, well, that's kind of interesting. Like I want to know about that. So and what he's done with popular brands or artists like Beyonce. So I think he's fun, but it also leaves me with I'm not going to learn everything in this presentation, but I do want to go learn more. I want to go research after the fact. And so I think sometimes you get speakers and you get a lot of the nuggets in that talk. And sometimes you get speakers and you're like, okay, that's piqued my interest. And I think there's more here that I want to go study a little bit more because I think we can do more with it. And that's kind of where I want to understand this identity, tribal culture piece a little bit more, and getting into his books, listening to maybe more podcast episodes with him, and following him now as a thought leader in the space.
Yeah, one of his statements was that the future of brand is tribal, right? And so he talks about know me, help me, win me. So it's also how do we attract the people that are like us culturally in our business, and I think that the speaker behind him, Will, Gadara, Will talked about at 11 Madison, is it 11 Madison Avenue? Or,
yeah.
#1 restaurant in the world, not the first year, but the second year, and how they took on this what they call it, unreasonable hospitality, right? So I came away charged up thinking, okay, there's so many things that I think we do well, and there's so many touch points though that I know that are repetitive in our business. And I think part of our culture is our kindness and who we are and how we treat our people and how we even really desire to treat our guests, right? So, and there's a lot of places where I think we can do these little bitty things, and we can leverage that through the social media of today, and really attract the person that would be our customer and create these raving fans.
Yeah, and I think like and this was like the ride back to the airport,
right?
Yeah, that we were talking about. I think if we can challenge ourselves to where are our guests, where is the culture right now? Mm-hmm. So if they are on TikTok, if they are on Instagram, Reels or on social media, okay, well that's where we can be. Okay, well, do we have to hire an agency? Do we just create our own spots and do we collaborate with others to make it a little bit more memorable? So there's both advertising, marketing, and then going where our customers are and understanding where the culture is. That can both help us grow our business, and then hey, where are our future new hires working?
Absolutely.
Where can we go find them to make sure that they understand what our culture is like? And so can we use that, telling them, hey, here's what the culture is for the culture at the river,
right?
And using that. So there's some good sparks of like imagination or inspiration.
And I think you find some of them in that community too. As you're marketing, you're not just marketing to sell something, you're marketing your business. I mean, obviously we want to sell something, but ultimately you're trying to attract the people who are going to be who are part of your culture and part of your family, part of your tribe. And then I think you naturally find people who want to come work for you because they're sitting out there and they're consuming what you're doing, and they're going, wow, I'd love to be a part of that. Let me go check that out. And so I think that's great. But he also said, don't sell them, help them. And then he said, social media was the media of the people. And then the last thing I think that he had was, he said, move from targeting an audience to targeting community. Mm. And so I think we do so many great things in the community already that I think a lot of people would love to be a part of that.
Yeah. So I think that a future culture thought leader in America, someone to follow, is Dr. Marcus Collins, best-selling book For the Culture, which is a great title for a book. And so we look forward to learning more about him and following what he's putting out there. As he said, culture is the cheat code. So that's a great phrase. Full stop.
Absolutely.
Culture is the cheat code, and he's got a lot of great one-liners and nuggets. And so I think he was a great speaker to kind of add to the mix. I look forward to learning more about him. So that's all we got for you today on this quick little episode of World Business Forum New York City recap episode on Dr. Marcus Collins. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.